She hadn't planned to open her heart that day. She barely planned to speak at all. But sometimes the weight you carry inside finds its own way out, even when your lips refuse to move. The autumn wind chased fallen leaves across the small town park, rattling the branches above her bench. Hannah sat there quietly, her fingers curled around a coffee cup that had gone cold long ago. She was used to watching from the sidelines now, the children laughing by the swings, couples strolling hand in hand, life carrying on without her. It had been 14 months since the accident. 14 months since the world had tilted and never righted itself. She pressed her lips together, not because she was holding back tears, those had run out months ago, but because she knew if she opened her mouth, the memories might spill out like broken glass. And she couldn't risk cutting anyone else with her pain. A shadow moved across her peripheral vision. She looked up. He stood a few feet away, hesitant, as though unsure if she'd welcome company. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather jacket and an expression that was both gentle and guarded. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice low enough to be respectful but not timid. Hannah gave the smallest nod. The bench groaned under his weight. They didn't speak for a while. The breeze carried the distant bark of a dog, the creak of chains on the swings, the faint hum of traffic far beyond the park. "I'm James," he said after a moment. She managed a polite smile but didn't offer her name. She'd learned that names had a way of making things too real, too personal. He didn't press. Instead, he followed her gaze toward the playground. "My niece is over there," he said, nodding toward a little girl in a purple coat climbing the jungle gym. "She's stubborn. Gets it from my sister." Hannah's eyes flickered briefly to the child, then away. She wasn't ready for children's laughter to brush against her heart again. James glanced at her coffee. "Cold," he observed. "That's a shame. Best part of coffee is when it's still warm." A tiny huff of air escaped her nose. Not quite a laugh, but the closest she'd come in months. They sat in companionable silence for a while longer. It was strange, she thought, how some people tried to fill every pause with words, while others simply let the quiet breathe. When the little girl came running over to ask for a snack, James stood, digging into his coat pocket for a granola bar. "See you around," he said to Hannah, as if certain their paths would cross again. She didn't answer. She only watched him walk away, the little girl's mittened hand in his. Hannah told herself she wouldn't think about him again. But 3 days later she found herself back in the park. And he was there. She hadn't decided if fate was playing tricks on her, or if it was offering her a lifeline she wasn't ready to take. Sometimes the smallest moments feel like tests, measuring how much of your heart you can risk giving away. The smell of roasting chicken drifted through the house long before Claire stepped into the kitchen. She paused in the doorway, unsure if she was intruding. The counter was cluttered with spice jars, peeled carrots, and an open cookbook, its pages spotted with years of use. Nathaniel glanced up from the stove, a wooden spoon in hand. "You're just in time to taste test," he said, offering a faint smile. Claire hesitated before taking the spoon. The savory warmth of the broth lingered on her tongue, pulling her somewhere she didn't expect. Back to Sunday dinners with her mother, when life had been messy but whole. She looked away quickly, embarrassed at the sting in her eyes. Ava, already perched at the table, swung her legs back and forth. "Claire, sit next to me," she chirped, patting the chair. Dinner was a patchwork of quiet moments and careful conversation. Nathaniel asked about her job at the cafe, about the classes she was taking at night. Ava talked about her favorite teacher, and Nathaniel listened with a patience that made Claire feel something she hadn't in a long time seen. When the plates were cleared, Nathaniel made coffee while Ava darted off to find a board game. Claire watched him move through the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, his hands sure but unhurried. It was the kind of steadiness she didn't trust yet but couldn't ignore. "Thanks for all this," she said quietly. His gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "It's just dinner, Claire." But she knew it wasn't. When Claire leaves that night, she finds something unexpected tucked inside her jacket pocket. A folded note in Ava's handwriting that reads, "You feel like home." Sometimes, love slips into your life so quietly, you don't even notice until it's already settled in your chest. The night air was sharp, the kind that nipped at her cheeks and made each breath feel fresher than the last. Claire tightened her scarf and started down the street, the faint glow from Nathaniel's porch light fading behind her. Halfway home, she reached into her jacket pocket for her phone and felt something crumpled inside. She frowned, pulling it out. It was a small piece of lined notebook paper, folded into a neat square. Unfolding it, she found Ava's handwriting, looped and uneven, letters pressing hard into the paper. "You feel like home." Claire stopped walking. The world seemed to still for a moment, the distant sound of tires on wet pavement fading into silence. She didn't know what to do with the warmth those words sparked in her, the way they softened a part of her that had been locked tight for years. When she finally got back to her apartment, she set the note on her nightstand. She told herself she'd throw it away in the morning. After all, it was just a child's words. But when she crawled into bed, she found herself staring at it again, tracing each letter as if memorizing them. Over the next few days, the note stayed where it was, and with each glance, the heaviness she carried seemed to lift, just slightly. Nathaniel didn't mention it when she saw him again, but there was a quiet knowing in his eyes, as if he sensed something had shifted. Ava, however, was less subtle. "Did you like my note?" she asked, grinning wide. Claire smiled back, though her voice was soft. "Yeah, Ava. I liked it a lot." That same week, Claire receives a phone call from someone she hasn't spoken to in years. A call that threatens to unravel the fragile peace she's been building. Some voices from the past can freeze your blood before they even say your name. It was a Wednesday evening, and the rain had been falling since noon, tapping against the windows like an impatient visitor. Claire was curled up on the couch, a mug of tea steaming beside her, a book resting unopened in her lap. She had just begun to drift into that hazy calm that comes with the sound of steady rain when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. The number was unfamiliar. For a moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail, but something, an old instinct she couldn't name, made her pick up. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice she hadn't heard in over 8 years spoke, low and gravelly. "Claire, it's Eli." Her stomach dropped, the air in her lungs catching like she'd been punched. She gripped the phone tighter, her knuckles whitening. She hadn't said his name in years, hadn't even allowed herself to think about him. "What do you want?" she asked, sharper than she intended. I need to see you," he said. "It's important." Claire's mind raced. Memories, some tender, some sharp enough to cut, flashed through her. She could still remember the night she walked away, vowing never to look back. "I don't think that's a good idea," she replied, her voice cold. But Eli's voice cracked in a way that startled her. "It's about family." The word hit her differently, stirring something she didn't want stirred. She closed her eyes as if she could block out the sound. But the truth was, his words had already taken root somewhere deep. The next day, Claire tells herself she won't meet him. But fate, in its cruel and strange way, brings him back into her life, at Nathaniel's doorstep. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving behind a heavy stillness. Claire busied herself in the kitchen, pretending the phone call from Eli hadn't happened. She made coffee, watered the plants, even reorganized the spice rack. Anything to push away the unease crawling under her skin. Nathaniel had taken Maggie to school and promised to pick her up later, giving Claire the quiet she thought she wanted. She was slicing vegetables for dinner when a knock echoed from the front door. 3 steady raps, each one louder than the last. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, she walked to the door, expecting a neighbor, or maybe a package delivery. But when she opened it, the world seemed to tilt. Eli stood there. He looked older, wearier. His hair was threaded with silver, his eyes carrying the weight of years she didn't know about. But those eyes, they were still the same deep brown that had once made her believe she was safe. "Claire," he said softly, almost like a question. Her first instinct was to slam the door. Instead, she gripped it tightly, her heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he replied, glancing down at the porch as if afraid to meet her gaze too long. "And Nathaniel said." She froze. "You spoke to Nathaniel?" Eli nodded, guilt flickering across his face. "He invited me in." Before she could respond, she heard footsteps behind her. Nathaniel appeared, a faint, cautious smile on his face. "I thought it might be time," Nathaniel said gently, looking between them. "Time for what?" Claire wanted to demand, but she couldn't find the words. All she knew was that the life she'd carefully built, the walls she'd reinforced, were about to crack. Over coffee at the kitchen table, Eli reveals the reason he's come, and it's something Claire never thought she'd hear from him. Some truths are too heavy to be carried alone. Claire sat at the far end of the kitchen table, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of coffee she didn't remember pouring. Nathaniel moved quietly between the counter and the stove, making sure there was something warm on the table. He seemed determined to give them space, yet close enough in case the conversation shattered. Eli sat opposite her, his hands clasped, elbows resting on the edge of the table like he was bracing himself. He looked different, not just older but humbled. The kind of humbled that comes from losing more than you ever thought possible. "I'm not here to make things complicated," Eli began, his voice low. I need to tell you something before it's too late." Claire kept her expression guarded. "Too late for what?" He swallowed hard, his gaze shifting to the steam rising from his cup. "I'm sick, Claire." The words hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. "What do you mean, sick?" she managed, her voice trembling despite her best effort to sound detached. Eli exhaled slowly, as though he had been rehearsing this moment but still couldn't find the right rhythm. "The doctors say it's my heart. It's failing. They don't know how much time I have, but it's not years." Claire's chest tightened. 1,000 conflicting emotions tangled inside her. Anger, sadness, confusion, and something dangerously close to compassion. She hated that compassion was even in the mix. Nathaniel, silent until now, set a plate of bread between them and spoke gently. "He wanted to tell you himself." Eli's eyes met hers, raw and searching. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But before I go, I want to know Maggie. And if you'll let me, I want her to know me. Even if just a little." The room fell into a silence so deep, Claire could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. She stared at him, every muscle in her body tense. Claire has to make a choice. Protect Maggie from a man who once broke her, or allow her daughter to meet him and risk reopening wounds she thought were healed. Sometimes, protecting the ones you love means letting them face the pain you never wanted them to see. Claire didn't answer right away. She sat frozen, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup as if the heat might ground her in the whirlwind inside her chest. Eli waited, not pushing, not pleading, just watching her with the kind of patience that comes from knowing you have less time than most. She finally spoke, her voice steady but low. "You don't get to just walk in here, say you're dying, and expect me to hand over my daughter to you like it's some last-wish charity project." Eli flinched but didn't look away. "I'm not asking for your blessing to take her away. I just want to meet her. Once. Maybe twice. I want her to know I exist. That I cared enough to try." Claire's lips trembled before she forced them still. Where was this care when she was born? Where was it when I was holding her at night, terrified I wouldn't be able to feed her? When she cried for a father she never had? I was drowning in my own mistakes, Eli said quietly, guilt threading through every word. And I'm not proud of that. But I can't undo the past. I can only try to do something right before it's over. Nathaniel, leaning against the counter, finally stepped in. "Claire, you've been a fortress for Maggie. You've kept her safe. But maybe..." Claire cut him off with a sharp glance. "Don't." Eli had stopped running. Nathaniel had stopped guarding his heart so tightly. And Claire, she had stopped pretending she didn't still care. Maggie barreled out of the kitchen with her snow boots half-zipped. "Aunt Claire, come build a snow fort with us." Claire laughed, setting down her mug. "All right, but only if I get the biggest snowball." They tumbled outside, the cold biting their cheeks, the air filled with the kind of joy that didn't need explaining. The kind you just felt. Later, as they stood together in the fading light, Eli caught her gaze. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. Gratitude, love, and the quiet promise of not disappearing again. For the first time in years, Claire realized she wasn't just visiting. She was home. Finally. And in the soft silence of the snow, a family battered, stitched back together began again. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please take a moment to support us by subscribing to Touching Soul Stories. Your subscription helps us share more heartfelt tales that inspire, heal, and connect us all. Don't forget to like and share so these stories can reach more souls. See you in the next story.